at Tender Central, how to ensure you have a first-class ticket to tender success. This is recorded in May 2025, as we've seen many recent changes in the way that tenders are being asked about and how suppliers are having to bid. So just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Joy Newton. My company is Amethyst Connect. My background is I'm a paediatric and adult nurse and also used to be a medical sales representative. I am now an experienced tender bid writer and an internal auditor for ISO 9001 and 14001. I have an expertise in public procurement, very specifically with the NHS. I'm also a social value associate and a carbon footprint calculator. So this webinar is a real overview of the sustainability requirements and public procurement requirements within the NHS procurement process. Sustainability includes environmental and social value considerations, and it is essential to have an understanding of mandatory tender compliance requirements to successfully participate in and win tender bids. We're going to look at the Procurement Act, social value, modern slavery, carbon reduction plan, evergreen, some NHS supply chain specifics, and the NHS supplier roadmap. So briefly, we're going to talk about procurement. We've had a new procurement bill. So in the UK, we are governed by the Procurement Act 2023. This is then supplemented by procurement policy notes, PPNs, and we will see many of them throughout this presentation. The new procurement bill in 2023 provided a single regime for procurement to reduce red tape, to provide better access for SMEs. The agenda of it was to help level up the UK and also take action on underperforming suppliers, and also have a method for crisis procurement. Our new procurement bill hopes to bring simplification, transparency, and increased flexibility into the way that tenders are conducted. There's a change of focus from MEET, which is most economically advantageous tender, to MAT, the most advantageous tender. There's an introduction of a supplier debarment register. KPIs are going to be required in contract performance. There's also some flexibility around direct award and also some safe harbour provisions. The new Procurement Bill 2023 went live on the 24th of February 2025. Lots of information for suppliers is available through the government commercial function, and there's a website there for you. There is also a new central digital platform which also went live on the 24th of February 2025. The idea with the new central digital platform is that it will provide better visibility of pipelines and notices, including pre-market engagement, so suppliers can see what opportunities will be coming their way. All notices will then be in one place and they will be linked through the procurement process journey. Registration service to store core supplier data will also be available, and also a function to share that data with contracting authorities. This is an enhancement of Find a Tender, so current information that you have on Find a Tender will transfer, including saved searches. In February 2025, we saw the launch of the National Procurement Policy Statement. It came along with 5 clear missions: to kickstart economic growth, make Britain a clean energy superpower, take back our streets, break down barriers to opportunity, and build a national health service fit for the future. Social value. The Procurement Policy Note 002 was updated in February 2025, but was originally published in June 2020, taking account of social value in the award of central government contracts. This is where we've seen consideration around social value being replaced with a requirement to score, and the score in tenders now is a minimum of 10%. Social value is evaluated in different ways depending on the contracting authority. Some will use the social value model, some the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the TOMS may be used, and some contracting authorities will use their own questions. The social value model that was launched in 2020 had 5 themes: COVID recovery, tackling economic inequality, fighting climate change, equal opportunity and well-being. Those 5 themes have been replaced by 5 missions in the new February 2025 social value model. And this is to reflect those the national procurement strategy: kickstart economic growth, make Britain a clean superpower, break energy superpower, break down barriers to opportunity, build an NHS fit for the future, and take back our streets. The social value model has 5 missions, 8 outcomes, 17 model award criteria, further model award sub-criteria, and 33 standard reporting metrics. The mission, Kickstart Economic Growth, has the outcomes of fair work, skills for growth, resilient, innovative and flexible supply chains. The mission, Make Britain a Clean Energy Superpower, has the outcome of sustainable procurement practices. The mission of Take Back Our Streets has the outcome of support the reduction in crime. The mission, Break Down Barriers to Opportunity, has the outcomes: employment and training for those who face barriers to employment, creating a pipeline of opportunities for the contract workforce, reducing barriers to entry for underrepresented groups. And the mission, Build an NHS Fit for the Future, has an outcome of increasing productivity through physical and mental well-being in the supply chain and communities in the relevant area. Some contracting authorities will use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as their platform for how to evaluate social value. I mentioned the TOMS. The TOMS is themes, outcomes and measures. There are 4 themes: work, economy, community and planet. They are then further supplemented with 14 outcomes, 30 core measures and 116 measures in total. The TOMS through the Social Value Portal was revised in February 2025 and has now become open source again, so you can download the TOMS from the Social Value Portal. Just to remember that social value as an organisation is usually linked to your ESG or CSR report, which is your overarching and embedded social value strategies and procedures. Contractual social value is very specific to the tender, so the commitments must be measurable, deliverable, reportable, relevant and proportionate to the contract. They need to provide additionality and also give you that differentiation or factor that will then make you stand out from your competitors. We are seeing that the social value score can sometimes be the difference between winning or losing a tender bid. It is absolutely vital in a social value narrative, in a tender question, in a tender bid, to make sure that you answer the question and refer to the evaluation methodology. Modern slavery. The UK Modern Slavery Act 2015 takes measures to combat slavery and human trafficking. It has in place powers of enforcement, measures to protect victims. It consolidates previous criminal offences and also introduces new ones with suitably severe punishments for offenders. There is also an appointment of an independent anti-slavery commission, requirements to eliminate in global supply chains, and also mandatory yearly statements from larger organisations. The Procurement Policy Note 009, which was updated from the one originally published in February 2023, tackling modern slavery in government supply chain, means that we now need to see more transparency, supply chain mapping, internal risk assessment, risk mitigation, policies and processes, and organisational awareness. And contracting authorities will be looking to suppliers to provide evidence of that within their supply chain and organisations. NHS supply chain are now putting all frameworks through a risk process before ITT. If it's a low risk framework, the MSAT is required with a score of 41% or more. If it is a medium risk framework, it will require the MSAT plus a further review. And if deemed to be high risk, for example, surgical gloves, textiles, and surgical instruments are all examples of high risk procurement frameworks, they will also require a third party independent audit. I've mentioned the MSAT a couple of times. The MSAT is a public procurement assessment that's found on the gov.uk website, and the MSAT stands for the Modern Slavery Assessment Tool. The scoring on the MSAT is under 40%, you're deemed to be a high risk supplier. 41 to 70% is a medium risk supplier. 71 to 100% is low risk. So to score well in the Modern Slavery Assessment Tool, you need to have a modern slavery statement, and that's regardless if you're in scope of producing one for the Modern Slavery Act 2015 or not. We're also seeing modern slavery statements being asked for in many tenders, regardless of where you fall in your turnover. A good modern slavery statement is really useful for contracting authorities to see what you're doing, but it also means a good score within the MSAT. You need to be assessing your supply chain. So you need to be mapping it. So your tier 1 suppliers are the suppliers that you buy from, and then your tier 2 suppliers and beyond are the suppliers that your suppliers buy from. And that's where we often see the risk start to increase in the further down the supply chain. You need to be doing a risk assessment, and what we will do is we do a desktop risk assessment that means that you can really identify where you need to be doing extra due diligence within your supply chain. That might then lead on to audit. That could be internal or external auditing of your supply chain. Policies in your organisation must include ethical trading, human rights and labour standards, and a supplier code of conduct. And you also need to be putting in place training for your employees. If you need internal training for your employees on modern slavery and labour standards, then we can help with that. Tick the box compliance solutions, just ask me about that, and we can provide all the training that you need to cover all the mandatory requirements around modern slavery. NHS Net Zero. The NHS has a target of net zero by 2045, and the only way they can do that is by their suppliers also becoming net zero. We have the taking account of carbon reduction plans in the procurement of major government contracts, the PPN that was originally published in June 2021 and updated in February 2025. All suppliers with the NHS need a carbon reduction plan, and they need to report scopes 1, 2 and a subset of scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. They need to commit to being net zero by 2050. They need to detail environmental management measures to be applied in the performance of the contract in the CRP, produce a carbon reduction plan and publish those emissions and carbon reduction plan on their company website. This infographic from the from the GHG protocol shows where carbon emissions are and how you report on them. So there are Scope 1 is your direct emissions of the company, facilities and vehicles. Scope 2 are the indirect emissions from your electricity. And Scope 3 are all 15 categories of everything else for your carbon emissions. The Scope 3 categories that are required for the carbon reduction plan are just the 5 that are upstream transportation and distribution, waste generated in operations, business travel, employee commuting, and your downstream transportation and distribution. There is a supply solution called Track My Carbon, which offers an easy online platform for putting your data in and getting those emission factors converted and also then uploaded into a carbon reduction plan. The compliant carbon reduction plan that is then produced by Track My Carbon can be downloaded and used for your website and also for tenders. The NHS England Evergreen Sustainable Supplier Assessment is now a requirement for suppliers to complete. It was launched in June 2023 by NHS England and is an online self-assessment questionnaire for suppliers to complete. It's designed to be a one reporting tool so suppliers have a single route for data sharing with the NHS. The assessment covers your progress around net zero, social value, modern slavery. It has 4 maturity levels. They will be valid for 12 months, so you complete an assessment every year, and significant updates can be made at any time. To gain access to the Evergreen assessment, you register for that on Atomis. This is NHS England's infographic on their maturity matrix, levels 1, 2, 3 and 4. Level 1 is if you have a carbon reduction plan, you will meet a level 1. And I find that most suppliers should be able to achieve a level 1 because they have to have a carbon reduction plan to tender with the NHS anyway. So to look at some of the NHS supply chain specifics, they have 5 supplier asks. They require you to have a carbon reduction plan. They require you to have a social value proposition, and they will ask for that as part of the tender process. They will ask you to complete Evergreen, and at the moment any level is acceptable, but from April 2026 they will require you to have a level 1 or above. And as I said, to have a carbon reduction plan means that you would have a level 1 anyway. They also ask you to help them with horizon scanning. This is unscored in tenders, but they ask for information so they can start using that to make sure that they know what's coming down the line in terms of legislation and what you need to be doing. Modern slavery is also a mandatory requirement with NHS supply chain, and they require you to have an MSAT score of 41% or more. NHS supply chain have a mandatory requirement for Evergreen. At the moment, it's all suppliers to have completed Evergreen, and that was from February 2024. If you're bidding on a new framework, you have to complete Evergreen within 3 months as part of the tendering process. And as I've already said, from April 26, there will be a requirement for you to be at level 1. They also have a requirement around IT security. We are seeing in other contracting authorities different questionnaires being used to ask for what your due diligence is around your IT security. NHS supply chain require you to have either Cyber Essentials Plus or the ISTP, which is the Information Security Third-Party Questionnaire completed. And that's a spreadsheet that they ask you to complete, and that's seen mandatory in all tenders. We also have seen NHS supply chain ask for further requirements on ISO compliance. Up until now, they accepted UK ISO certificates that were with either UCAS accredited or UCAS accredited alternative or equivalent, I should say, a UCAS equivalent within the UK. They have changed that requirement. The NHS supply chain's requirement is that your ISO certificate, if you're in the UK, must be UCAS accredited. If it's an international ISO certificate, it needs to be an international equivalent to UCAS. And there is a link there to the accreditation bodies for international equivalents, and this is now mandatory and is a contract requirement. Looking forward to the future, this is the NHS England's infographic on their roadmap, and we're going to look particularly at April 2027. All suppliers will be required to publicly report targets, emissions and publish a carbon reduction plan for global emissions aligned to the NHS net zero for all their scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. So that includes all 15 categories. So all the categories that are relevant to your organisation. What that means is to be compliant in April 2027, you need to be collecting data in January 2026. So we are here in May 2025. So you need to be working out between now and the end of the year where your scope 3 and your global emissions are for your organisation. So then in January 2026, you will be able to start collecting that data. So in 2027, you will have the data to hand to report on so you can be compliant for this milestone. So an overview. Suppliers need a carbon reduction plan. This is mandatory. The carbon reduction plan must be updated annually. You need to complete the MSAT, the Modern Slavery Assessment Tool, annually and have a minimum of a 41% score. You need to complete and publish a modern slavery statement, again, annually. You need to complete Evergreen every year. You will be asked for a social value response in all tenders that you participate in. And you also need Cyber Essentials Plus or completion of the ISTP. And also, as I said in the last slide, you need the ISO UCAS accredited certificate. That was a lot of information in a very short space of time. If you need any further help or support or want any more information on any of the things that we've discussed in this webinar, then please contact me and I'll be delighted to talk to you about those.